Were they so paranoid about what was going on that they felt they had to document the whole thing? Or actually, did they already have their sights on the fact that they could potentially monetize all of this stuff?
Well, there was lots in there. I mean, there was like we had Meghan crying. As you say, we had Harry saying he was on his freedom flight.
It feels like we've lived a million Harry and Meghan lives since this came out.
My jaw hit the floor and it didn't pick it up for quite a long time after seeing this curtsy.
It's a clip that I think will forever haunt them.
Welcome to Royal Exclusive Rewind, where we delve back into the files and relive some of the highlights and lowlights of royal family history. Remember to subscribe to us here on the Royal Exclusive YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. In 2022, 28.7 million households tuned in to watch the biggest debut for a documentary in Netflix history. Harry and Meghan, starring Harry and Meghan, covered the couple's relationship from the early days of courtship to explosive family confessions, stories of racism in the royal family, and a curtsy so deep it broke the internet. I'm The Sun's royal editor Matt Wilkinson, and joining me to discuss all this and more is news.com.au's royal reporter Bronte Coy and royal correspondent for Sky News Rhiannon Mills. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hello.
So Harry and Meghan, the Netflix documentary, surely the most scandalous, outrageous thing about the whole story is that they filmed it in the first place, Rhiannon, a 6-part documentary. We'd never, ever seen anything like this before.
Look, we've got to take everyone back to 2022 and the kind of anticipation and build-up to this documentary series was just massive. We ended up having a watch party in the office. Everyone was just desperate to kind of get the lines out. What had they said? What more had they done to the royal family? But the thing that I really took away from it was the fact that they had filmed themselves on their phones in that moment when it all seemed to be imploding in 2020, the start of 2020, when they said, right, we're off, we've had enough. And yet we had Harry filming himself as he was about to get on a plane to Canada. We also had Meghan filming herself crying. And at the time, I couldn't quite get my head around it. And I was kind of divided on what was going on. Were they so paranoid about what was going on that they felt they had to document the whole thing? Or actually, did they already have their sights on the fact that they could potentially monetize all of this stuff? And I'm not sure which one I ended up falling down on, to be honest.
And so much a part of their narrative when they left, and they said it in the Harry and Meghan docuseries, was that they never intended, their plan was never to be all out of the royal family. Actually, Harry has said many times that he tried very hard to make it work with them within the family in some capacity. Now, of course, that does not work with a Netflix docuseries. So presumably, they were not planning, what they're trying to say is they were not planning to have all these big commercial deals that would expose their lives in that way. And exactly to your point, if that's the case, at that exact moment when he says they were trying desperately to stay in some way, why were they filming themselves crying and with the exit strategy? And, you know, the Netflix deal came some time later. But it is very much, it looks like a big clue that that's where their minds already were headed.
Well, there was lots in there. I mean, there was like we had Meghan crying. As you say, we had Harry saying he was on his freedom flight. We even had one section I recall where he had received a message from William, and I think Meghan said, "Well, he's your brother." These were intimate things that we'd never seen from a royal family for basically ever. But one thing I want to pick up on is the curtsy. Meghan's talking about the first time she meets the Queen. She's talking about, didn't know about the royal family, and compared it to this kind of American-themed medieval party that they have. Watching it the first time that I did, my jaw hit the floor and it didn't pick it up for quite a long time after seeing this curtsy, Bronte.
I do think that for me, this was one of the most cringeworthy, awkward moments of the entire series. And it was, as you watched it unfold, Harry was all of us. You can see his face in that moment. And I believe that he realised how badly this was going to land, because it also flies in the face of what we know about Meghan and what she and Harry have said about her own personality, which is that she's meticulous to detail. She's always prepared. Her staff have, you know, the kinder side of what they've said is that she's very organised and is on top of everything that she needs to do and likes to be prepared. Now, if that's the case, why is she behaving as though she was sort of dropped into some medieval theme park? It doesn't make any sense, because anyone that has access to the internet would be able to find out the very basic details. And it also, of course, the major issue with this curtsy was that it disrespected the Queen. It was a lack of respect to the Queen, especially as Britons would know. That's the part that really, with everything that's been said and done, that's the one that really would never fly. And I think for her, that was sort of the unforgivable moment. It was very uncomfortable. Even as it was happening, I thought, oh, what are you doing?
It's a clip that I think will forever haunt them. Yes, look, you and I, we all follow them round. There is kind of this flummery around the whole thing that you think, well, this is all a bit peculiar. But as you say, it's just the biggest no-no to disrespect the late Queen, to disrespect Harry's grandmother. And also, it just didn't sit right the whole time when they were saying, we're leaving, we've had enough, the institution is racist, they haven't taken our mental health issues seriously enough. On the sideline, they were saying, but this isn't anything to do with the Queen because we respect her. And yet with this, she went under the bus with the rest of the family, just as she did when they were criticising the institution, because ultimately she was head of it. And that was the whole problem for me, is you can't in one breath say, well, this isn't about the Queen, my grandmother, we love her very much and respect her, and then actually do all of this to the institution and say it was racist, it didn't support us, and we felt kicked out. It just didn't sit right.
Well, let's talk about some of those things, because it was meant to be a show about their new life. It was meant to be about them, almost finding freedom, to use someone else's phrase, but it was about them going to America and saying goodbye. But they still had scores to settle. Maybe not as many as they did in Oprah or in Spare, but there were still things they were talking about, how Meghan wasn't accepted, or how, talking about her mental health wasn't recognised, and basically comparing Brexit and racism and Meghan and wrapping it all up into one.
You have to remember that Netflix will have put their hands in their pockets and wanted to get a lot for their money, and therefore they would have wanted this very deep personal exploration about how Harry and Meghan felt wronged by the royal family, and we got that in spades. I would say most of the documentary was a case in point of saying we fell in love and then it all fell apart, and these were the reasons why. And one of the quotes that really stood out to me was where he described how it was felt that Meghan had to go through all of this difficulty and criticism as a rite of passage, saying that other members of the family had basically suggested, well, my girlfriend, my wife has had to go through this, so she's going to have to go through the same thing. Harry then saying, well, no, hang on, the racism element is different. So yeah, they did seem to kind of really labour this point of we feel like the outsiders. And that, talking at the time to an American journalist, they made the point that actually at this point, had we moved on? Should they have moved on more? Should they have made it more positive? Because Americans love a kind of boy and girl done good type story. And yet they were still reflecting back on the pains of the past.
And it's also, I was looking back at the coverage that we had around this time. It feels like we've lived a million Harry and Meghan lives since this came out. But back then, when we first heard that there was going to be a docuseries delving into their lives, I feel like it was very much at pains from their team. They went at pains to put out the fact that it's going to be about their love story, that it was going to be about who they are, because that was what they felt they hadn't been able to convey properly amid all the negative press they had within the royal family. But then when it started, as you say, we'd already had Oprah, which was very shocking because it was the first time they delved into these rather large explosive comments and incidents from their time in the royal family and their allegations. But we also had Harry's book, his memoir, coming down the line as well, which went very much into all of it again. Mm-hmm. So Harry and Meghan, the docuseries, I remember when I first started watching it thinking, well, yes, it is about their love story a little, but it's also a lot of retrospective score settling. We are still going back and talking about their issues within the family, particularly with William. They talk about their first meeting with William and Catherine and how it was all so formal and Meghan was barefoot, and there was alluded to the fact that Catherine was quite proper and stiff and didn't want to hug her and all of these sorts of things. And I thought, well, this isn't about you putting the narrative out about why we should love you, why we should buy you, why we should be looking into the commercial output and why you're interesting to us now that you've left the royal family. In fact, it is still talking about your issues from back then. And it is very funny to say this now because this came out in 2022 and it is 2026 and we are still occasionally getting comments.
Well, these are very good points, but didn't they just do it for the money?
Well, yes, that's very cynical, Matt.
And ultimately, as I said, Netflix would have paid a lot of money to get this. Like, I think that was the whole point why they signed up Harry and Meghan on this kind of mega deal of, right, you're going to be able to make your own programmes, was this. Like, you talked about how many people watched this documentary. I do think what is interesting and stands out about it, though, and because we've heard so much from Harry and Meghan, we're kind of a bit blasé now about, oh, we expect to get all this. But if you think back, before they left, we never would have got anything like this from any members of the royal family.
Should we have anything like this?
Airing the dirty laundry.
Look at the mess it's made for them.
Yeah.
They can't really
It's
release
caused
anything
chaos.
now.
Yeah. It's caused utter chaos. And you look at the relationship that he now has with his brother, it's completely destroyed that. And in the end, it's largely probably been for commercial reasons, whether it's this, whether it's the book. He's taken the money and people have wanted him to give as much of himself as he possibly can. And yet they still say, we want a private life. They still try to obscure their children's faces. And that's what kind of I find difficult to square in my mind is how do you put yourself out there? How do you make these comments about your family? Very recently, he did the interview, didn't he, after he'd lost his appeal for security, where he talked about, oh, I haven't spoken to my father, and I don't know how he's doing. It's that difficulty, isn't it, for the family? He is now outside of the institution. He clearly is still quite a troubled man, but he's unleashed from almost some might say the protection, some might say the constraints of the institution.
Should they have done it, Bronte?
The Harry and Meghan docuseries. Again, looking at it in the context of they'd done the Oprah interview first. The Spare memoir was coming out very shortly afterward. I think, yes, commercially, of course. It was a huge success and it earned them a lot of money. Looking at what's happened since then, that was 2022, we're a few years on, I think they've really struggled to create content that people are going to engage with, because it almost is like they've poisoned the well, because they sort of fired all their shots in that, and it did create chaos. I don't know how much they made from it, so that will probably answer the question of whether it was worth it. But I do struggle to think, if you're looking at longevity in your post-royal career, I think they fired all their shots in this one big emotional hit, and I think they could have changed the narrative a little bit more with this. I think the book, he went into everything he wanted to go into. The Oprah interview was the first time they'd spoken out in that way. This, I think, could have focused more on them. They talked about their first date. They showed photos and texts that we hadn't seen. Yes, it's all very sweet and not for everyone. And of course, it's not as controversial. But I think there would have been interest, and they could have reshaped the narrative around the pair of them outside the royal family in a different way back then, had they handled it differently.
You mentioned about wanting reconciliation with his father. Doing documentaries like this, despite it being 3-4 years ago, that surely damages any chances of reconciliation. If he really wanted reconciliation with his father, should he have done this type of documentary? And
that's why it's really important that we do look back at this documentary. We do look back at Oprah. We do look back at Spare.
Don't forget it. Absolutely.
We can't, can we? And remember what was said and done around that time. Because otherwise you could think, well, hang on a minute, why are the royal family kind of bearing grudges? And then you only have to think about some of the things that he's said. So talking about his brother and his brother kind of blowing up and being very angry, basically exposing very personal interactions between family members. And that, I think, is why it is so difficult now for the royal family to move on, because ultimately they don't necessarily trust that what they're going to say isn't going to end up in Harry and Meghan Part 2. And also, I do think there seem to be efforts to try and build bridges. Certainly from Harry's side, there is an acknowledgement that an awful lot has been said and done, and you can't erase any of that. It's all out there. It's all on the internet, or it's on the streaming services. But I hope that maybe there can be a reset of some sort, which I think we started to see last year when Harry was over and met up with the King. But I find it really hard to know how that reset is going to happen with Prince William, which I think is ultimately really sad. And
a final point on that as well, just because, as you said, you mentioned the physical altercation that Harry and William got into, that Harry alleged. Something that struck me the whole time I was watching it that I meant to say earlier was the fact that Harry talks so much about how difficult it is being within the monarchy and not being able to just get your side of the story out or to set the record straight or to speak your truth. And he was speaking about really personal moments, for example, that fight with his family and the hypocrisy. This is the part that really just sat so badly with me. The hypocrisy of going into these allegations of fights that they've had or conflict that they've had, knowing that by your own admission, they cannot speak out in the same way that you can. Felt like you're sort of throwing out shots that can't be returned. It felt really unfair. So that was the other element of the docuseries and some of the particular stories he went into, and also with his book, you know, later down the line. I just felt that part was quite jarring.
And just finally, I mean, ultimately, we're talking about the repercussions, you know, this earthshake that happened across the world when this did get released. Let's be honest, it was a big deal, but it was a TV show. It was entertainment. That's why Netflix had it. It was, you know, it was to get viewers. It was to get eyeballs and make money. Some of the reviewers, I'll just go through a few of them from the Time. The Times said beautifully shot, but it was repetitive, whingy, and boring. The Independent
Wasn't boring.
It wasn't boring, was it? The Independent touched on it. They said, did Meghan really think it was a joke that she had to curtsy to the Queen of England? And then the Guardian say exactly the same story. We always knew, told in the way that we'd expect to hear from people who were telling it. Entertainment-wise, was it good? Like, as a reviewer, as a non-royal expert, was it good telly?
I liked watching it. I liked watching it for all the reasons we've talked about. I think it was probably a bad decision and there were some really horrible moments in terms of family relationships. But as a viewer, very entertaining. Deservedly
the best or best-selling debut documentary, just based on entertainment-wise?
Look, Oprah had teed it up, hadn't she? And so everyone just wanted to know how much further they were going to go, whether that was us within the royal pack or whether that was kind of Mrs. Meghan sitting at home with a TV remote. People are just fascinated in Harry, Meghan, how it all imploded, and still now on whether that reconciliation is ever going to happen.
Let's hope there's a second series. Let's not hope there's a second series.
Oh, you're evil, Matt.
Thanks, guys. That was really interesting to get your points of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for on Royal Exclusive Rewind, but join me next time for some more royal nostalgia when we open the files and relive another iconic moment.